The hidden transformation beneath Russia's mighty walls is staggering. While the world focuses on war and politics, a silent invasion is unfolding, one that will reshape the heart of the nation itself. Imagine a sea of more than 27,000 Indian workers pouring into Moscow, waiting in endless lines, their hopes piled high on fragile documents. But is this enough to replace the thousands of young Russian men pulled onto the front lines? The answer chills the spine: absolutely not. Russia's leadership acknowledges this reality: more laborers are desperately needed. The claim? Hundreds of thousands. The driving force? Simple economics. In the shadows of St. Petersburg's gleaming streets, some workers are tech specialists, promising monthly salaries of 100,000 rubles, about $1,240. Remarkably high, yet in a country battling inflation and currency devaluation, how long can these promises stand? The air thickens with uncertainty, because this promise might already be insufficient. Sources warn an additional 40,000 Indian workers could arrive by 2026. Speculations soar that the total could reach 1 million, an immense wave replacing not just labor but entire communities. Officials openly consider this model akin to Dubai's, an astonishing idea for a nation claiming superpower status. The living conditions vividly reveal this change: corridors turned into bustling marketplaces, stoves nestled into cramped hallways, the scent of spices mingling with the scent of change. Shoes pile high on the ground, an unspoken sign of cultural shifts. This isn't just about filling jobs, it's about filling the void left by war. As Russian men vanish into trenches, these migrant workers step into the void, and into a future they may not understand. What awaits these newcomers? Will they quietly become part of Russia's unspoken war effort? Or will their presence spark unrest in the heart of a nation bleeding from within? The deeper truth? Russia's grand identity is being quietly rewritten, an empire relying on imported labor to survive. And behind the facade of economic necessity lies a darker reality: human lives sent into the chaos of war, under promises of security that might be nothing more than illusions. How much longer can this silent tide conceal its true cost? What future awaits a country that replaces its own citizens with foreign labor, all while the sound of distant gunfire echoes in the background? These images expose the true scope of this migration and its deep cultural shift. In dormitories for Indian workers, hallways morph into miniature markets. Stoves crowd cramped spaces, piles of shoes litter floors, dozens cook traditional dishes amid the chaos. Can you imagine your homeland's heart, once echoing with familiar voices, now resonating with the sizzle of alien spices? That's Moscow's new reality, ripped apart by war's cruel grip. This isn't fleeting shelter, it's a full-blown takeover of living quarters. Cooking smells waft through air thick with steam from pots, crowds press close, skin brushing skin in overheated corridors, showing how Russia's core population has flipped overnight. As Russians brave the bloodshed far away, Moscow's voids, streets, factories, homes fill with strangers hauled across continents. Kremlin's grand ideology crumbles into raw survival tactics in these tight, smoky passages. Data roars: this migrant surge isn't optional, it's vital. Casualties in drafts from Ukraine obliterate Russian industry's spine. Moscow Times reports Kremlin's nod for 72,000 Indian workers, a facade of control. Yet ground photos and rapid arrivals prove quotas shattered, mere ink on paper now. India's numbers in Russia jumped 25% last year, poised to multiply twofold by 2025's close. Digging deeper exposes Kremlin's ambition soaring beyond. Times of India predicts 1 million Indian laborers flooding Russia, a mega labor swap, state-orchestrated. Ural Chamber of Commerce chief affirms it's no myth: fierce push hits year-end targets, roaring prisons like Sverdlovsk region. Why such brutal market tremors? Blame the plunge in Russian men's workforce. But what horrors lurk as these arrivals fuel not just machines, but relentless conflict? A twist emerges, whispering of workers marching from factories to trenches. As Russia's industrial hubs like Sverdlovsk push hard to hit massive worker targets by year's end, the labor market reels from a sharp drop in local men available for jobs, all pulled into the conflict. Imagine the roar of massive machines in Sverdlovsk's factories, grinding to a halt without steady hands. Or the steady hum of looms in Ivanova's textile mills, now silent if not for outsiders. Why must Russia beg for foreign labor to keep its own engines running? Deep in the heartland, photos from an Ivanova factory captured this raw desperation up close. Dusty floors slick with sweat, threads tangled in the air like forgotten dreams, entire shifts lean on Indian arrivals to spin the wheels. Feel the humid press of bodies in those echoing halls, the faint spice of distant homes mingling with machine oil. These regions cling to newcomers just to survive. Russia chases a bold swap its own people out, imports in to plug a gaping hole of 800,000 empty spots. Machinery stalls idle. Electronics lines flicker dark. Construction sites echo empty. Can a giant nation truly crumble from within like this? The home front bends under invisible weight, cracking quietly. That bold talk of unbreakable power? It whispers away now, lost in the clank of Sverdlov's gears and Ivanova's weaving shadows. Yet, the true shadow falls not in these humming plants, but across muddy fields far east, where promises shatter like brittle glass. Troubling whispers spread, some lured by job offers end up far from factories, thrust into Ukraine's harsh edges. Voices from trusted outlets echo the alarm, painting a picture no one wants to see. Then, a raw video surfaces from those who witnessed it firsthand, hearts pounding as cameras catch the truth. In shaky footage, Indian voices break the silence. We sense the bitter close, one murmurs, eyes hollow. Countless drawn to danger zones, lives cut short, others vanished in the fog. And back home? Leaders turn away, unmoved. The air thickens with unspoken grief, the weight of betrayal hanging like storm clouds. This raw admission unmasks a desperate ploy. The forces there, scarred by a million losses and scrambling for bodies, twist work visas into unwitting traps. Pawns on a board they never chose. The pain sharpens in personal tales that chill the soul. Another clip rolls, a young voice from India trembles, reliving his friend's nightmare. He inked a deal with Russia's defense arm, chasing quick cash to feed dreams. The screen flickers with tension, breaths held. But what twisted fate awaited him next? Picture this. In the last segment, a young Indian man poured out his heart about his friend who signed a contract with the Russian Ministry of Defense, lured by dreams of cash. What fate awaited him? The young Indian in the video reveals a nightmare. His friend perished just 10 days after signing. Why? A staggering lack of preparation. These men, arriving as students or laborers, got no military training at all. Once the contract hit paper, he plunged into pure chaos in Donetsk, right on the brutal front line near Pokrovsk. Now, hunted as missing, presumed lost. And according to his account, the other 5 Indians who joined the same pact? All gone, wiped out in the violence. The narrator's gritty knowledge of Pokrovsk's deadly horror slams home how close these workers brush with war's cruel edge. Can you feel the chill of betrayal? It's like icy winds whipping through mud-soaked trenches, voices echoing faint pleas in the fog. Flashback, remember the moment they signed those papers? The sterile office smell of ink and stale coffee, the sound of pens scratching against paper, your heart pounding like a drum as fingers tremble on the dotted line, promising riches but sealing doom. Rumbling from the videos, Russia seems to be seizing this endless stream of arrivals not just for factories and shop floors, but to plug the gaping holes on the battlefield. Cheap manpower twisted into cannon fodder. This grim shadow looms over talks between Putin and Modi. Their handshake? It ushered in visa-free flows that cloak this shadowy trade. What does the Kremlin reap? Amidst punishing sanctions, a fresh workforce to knead the economy back to life, and expendable troops pushed into the fray. Ready soldiers molded from desperation. And India? New Delhi might pocket perks, snapping up deals for cheaper Russian oil, glittering diamonds, and vital fertilizers. But allegations paint a blood price. Young lives shattered, untrained boys tumbling into Pokrovsk's mire, towns they never knew, maps erased by deaths untold. Can you hear the distant thuds of artillery, smell the metallic tang of fear-stained soil? Americans voice suspicions that this labor wave funnels straight to the front. What eerie twist hides in the Kremlin's grand design? The story, sparked by dances in Red Square, now spirals into Donetsk's merciless grind. Putin's vision of an expanded Russia? Propped by outsiders duped with paychecks, only to march as unknowing martyrs. But what hollow victory awaits when flesh pays the ultimate toll? In our last tale, we uncovered how Russia's labor crisis funnels every ruble paid to foreign workers straight out of the country's coffers, vanishing into distant Asian pockets instead of boosting local economies, a bleeding wound under Western sanctions that exposes Putin's hidden dependencies. But imagine this chilling truth slapping you across the face. Are you ready for the brutal twist that flips Russia's power play upside down, leaving Putin not as the dominant leader, but as a puppet dancing to Modi's tune? In Moscow's icy grip, where the Kremlin's stronghold should echo with infallible might, Indians arrive as saviors. Yet today, each hefty 100,000 rubles slipping into a worker's palm in Sverdlovsk or Ivanova evaporates instantly. Gone. Not fueling Moscow's bustling shops or echoing in local wallets. No, this cash rockets straight to Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, escaping Russia's sanctions-strained banks like smoke from a forbidden fire. Feel the sting? The atmosphere thickens with the acrid tang of economic suicide, a relentless hemorrhage draining foreign reserves, sabotaging capital controls that the Kremlin clings to desperately. Shocking? Picture the taste of betrayal on your tongue. How could Putin's regime, preaching unity against Western foes, unleash the silent fracture tearing at the seams of Russian society? Rhetorical whispers echo in the corridors. Is this progress or peril? Years of propaganda sold a vision of ironclad Russian world unity, protecting sacred traditions against external storms. But now, a battle-worn soldier limps home from Ukraine's mud, only to confront alien enclaves sprouting in his neighborhood. Russian tongues silenced, replaced by the rhythmic cadence of Hindi in cramped ghettos. Shoes littering floors like fallen comrades, the pungent aroma of curry spices clashing with the frostbitten air, traditional stews bubbling onto narrow corridors, a tactile invasion that presses against skin-tight walls. Fresh from the trauma of the Crocus City Hall massacre, this border flood ignites ultra-nationalist fury, fanning flames of panic into wildfires of ethnic unrest. Did the Kremlin invite saviors, or spark a powder keg of social conflict simmering beneath Moscow's surface? Deeper still, in diplomatic shadows where velvet shoes tread softly on marble floors, this workforce swap exposes Putin's vulnerability raw, unmasked. See the grand upheaval. Russia's might crumbles not with thunderous explosions, but through whispered human shifts. In his geopolitical tango with Modi, Putin twirls not as the maestro, but as the lead, his war machine in factories gasping for breath. Why? With a single phone call, Modi could sever this lifeline, halting the heartbeat of Russian industry in an instant. Feel the earth shift? The air hums with deafening silence, the what-if of factories grinding to halt, economic gears screeching against the void. Is Putin's grand empire, propped by imported bodies, mere illusion? Hold on, for what dark secret lurks next could shatter everything, revealing a dominance dissolved into debt-fueled desperation. Just imagine the cold dread. If Modi snaps his fingers, does Russia's facade shatter like fragile ice? And who really pulls the strings now, the Russian bear or the Indian elephant? The reek of vulnerability clings, a twist where conquerors become conquered, begging in the shadows of dependency. As alarms blare in unseen Allied corridors, with Indian workers deceived into deadly roles by the tens of thousands, rising mortality whispers echo louder. Each life lost in frostbitten trenches chips away at ties, forcing reluctant dialogues where New Delhi demands justice. Can Putin shrug off these diplomatic barbs, or will the global stage witness his empire unravel thread by thread? The tactile chill of severed alliances presses down, smells of spilled blood mingling with bureaucratic ink in hushed meetings. Imagine your heart pounding. What if Russia's borrowed strength crumbles, exposing a leader trapped in his own gamble? This isn't victory, it's a slow descent into oblivion. But pause, what forbidden truth hides in these transfers, a revelation that could humiliate Putin's legacy forever? The wind shifts ominously, carrying sense of imminent storm. Are we witnessing the end of an iron grip, or just the beginning of a humbling fall? Landarin, stay tuned, for the shadows deepen, truths unravel, and nothing is as it seems. The story begins with a shocking reality. Russia's powerful image is crumbling from within. Imagine the sound of millions of footsteps as thousands of Indian workers flood into Moscow, their footsteps echoing through narrow corridors transformed into vibrant marketplaces. What is fueling this massive migration? The answer lies behind closed doors, where the Kremlin secretly depends on these newcomers to keep its economy running. Despite Russia's claims of independence and sovereignty, a new dependency is quietly growing. The dependence on Indian workers is no longer just economic, it's political. Images emerge of massive lines, more than 10,000 migrants waiting in silence, awaiting documentation in front of Moscow's immigration offices. Their presence is a calculated move by the Kremlin, an endless tide of humanity designed to fill the void left by Russian men fighting overseas. Currently, data shows about 27,000 Indian workers are already in Russia, but is that enough? Can an entire nation's survival hinge on this influx? The answer seems alarmingly clear: no. The desperation is palpable. These workers are promised monthly salaries of 100,000 rubles, approximately $1,240, an attractive figure in a struggling economy. Fires of hope flicker at their feet as they cook traditional meals in cramped dormitories, or corridors turn into bustling markets. Smells of spices and frying vegetables fill the air. Yet beneath this surface, something darker simmers. The video footage exposes how Russian factories depend entirely on Indian labor to keep machinery humming. The country's own workforce is dwindling, fighting in war zones or lost to economic despair, forcing Putin to seek salvation in distant lands. But the story doesn't stop at factory floors. The real nightmare is in Ukraine's trenches. Allegations swirl of Indian workers, brought in under promises of employment, being sent into the brutal chaos of conflict. Witness reports reveal their stories, voices filled with dread, recounting how many have lost their lives, how many are missing, thrown into hell without training or warning. One young man's voice trembles as he recounts discovering his friend's fate. Just 10 days after signing a contract, he was caught in a deadly frontline ambush, unprepared for the violence unfolding around him. How could they have been sent there so unprotected? The truth hits like a thunderclap: these workers are being sacrificed, their lives traded for geopolitical gains. Putin's Russia, once proud and independent, now relies on imported labor to sustain its crumbling industries and military needs. The frontline casualties are mounting, and the real question remains: who is truly in control? The Indian government, aware of these risks, remains silent. Meanwhile, India's Prime Minister Modi holds the strings, dictating whether this exploitation continues or halts. Just one phone call could sever Russia's lifeline, yet the secrets of this trade deepen. As the battle rages on far from Moscow's glittering streets, the grim reality unfolds: Russia is quietly surrendering its sovereignty. The grand illusion of a resilient superpower is slipping away, replaced by a dependency born of necessity. Each plane landing in Moscow signifies more than just cargo; it represents soft power lost, the dismantling of an empire piece by piece. This story is not about a war of borders, it's about a nation losing its identity, its independence, and perhaps its future. The question remains: how long can this cycle continue before everything collapses? Red Square, the symbolic heart of Moscow, where ancient Kremlin walls once radiated Russian dominance, now overrun by a vibrant influx from afar. Imagine the clash of cultures under those imposing walls, echoed in the rhythmic beats of unfamiliar dances, a tourist facade masking a desperate shift in power. But beneath the surface, a startling truth emerges: this is Vladimir Putin's gamble to replace Ukraine's war casualties, flooding Russia's workforce with fresh arrivals. Shocking revelations from sources like France 24 hint at a darker plot: laborers slipping into battle trenches. Brace yourself: how has Putin's quest torn open Russia's soul, dependency lurking in plain sight with disastrous consequences? Imagine 300 characters of gripping intrigue here, spanning the shock of replacing soldiers with unwitting workers from half a world away. Part 1 fades into the stark reality of Moscow's immigration lines, where 10,000 Indians queue for visas, filmed by eyewitnesses in a relentless human wave. This isn't mere bureaucracy, it's a visually overwhelming tide of change, where the air thickens with anticipation, scents of foreign spices mixing with the chill of submission. Kremlin insiders confirm it: Russian leadership, eyeing a staggering labor void of hundreds of thousands, welcomed them with promises of 100,000 rubles monthly, roughly $1,240 despite currency woes. International reports, including from Hindustan Times, verify this. Yet, as the Russian ruble erodes under inflation, is this influx the miracle the Kremlin markets, or a band-aid on a gaping wound? Cliffhanger: with projections of 40,000 more arrivals by 2026, what forbidden path lies ahead for these migrants? Recalling the growing migrant queues swelling Moscow's streets, crunching under economic strain, and the scent of roasting spices from dormitory corridors, a sensory assault transforming Russian living spaces into mini-delis. Stoves hiss in narrow hallways, shoes piled haphazardly, a tactile reminder of cultural upheaval as workers cook traditional feasts amid dense crowds. Not temporary lodgings, but a societal upheaval where Russia's own citizens vanish to front lines, replaced by arrivals from distant shores. The Moscow Times highlights a brewing crisis, With Kremlin quotas of 72,000 Indians already shattered, population surge is tracking a 25% rise. Moscow's iconic Red Square, once the heart of Russian power and grandeur, now tells a startling story. Instead of soldiers or political rallies, there's an endless sea of unfamiliar faces, Indians filling the space. What's happening amid that historic backdrop? Are these tourists? Or something far more alarming? At first glance, the scene seems innocent, a city bustling with life. But beneath this surface lies a calculated transformation. The images of Indian workers dancing in the square, smiling in colorful traditional clothing, are misleading. They're being portrayed as symbols of progress. But in reality, they mark the start of a startling wave reshaping the Russian workforce. Behind these scenes, there's a quiet, relentless shift taking place. What if these images are just the surface of a deeper truth? Sources like France 24 reveal that some of these migrant workers aren't just filling factories, they're being directed straight to the front lines in Ukraine. The implications are chilling. As Russian soldiers are sent abroad, who's left behind? And what happens to those sent into the chaos of war, far from their homes and families? Now, let's focus on the scenes unfolding at Moscow's immigration offices. Witnesses describe a relentless human tide, tens of thousands of Indian migrants queued, waiting with hope and uncertainty. Is this the new normal? A massive crowd of 10,000, an entire city of new arrivals standing shoulder to shoulder in narrow lines, hoping for their papers to be processed. But these numbers tell a stark story. Official figures state there are about 27,000 Indian workers now in Russia. Yet, these images suggest a much larger influx. Is this enough to replace the Russian men drafted into war? Certainly not. Authorities admit that the labor shortages are critical. The reality is grim, Russia is losing its workforce at alarming rates. Could foreign workers be the only option left? As the scene in Moscow unfolds, the economic urgency becomes clear. Workers from India are promised wages of around 100,000 rubles per month, that's roughly $1,240. For many, this is an opportunity of a lifetime. But behind the promise lies a shadow of exploitation. As the ruble weakens and inflation soars, can these promises truly be kept? Or are these workers unknowingly becoming pawns in a much larger game? Meanwhile, beyond Moscow's streets, this wave of migration continues to swell. Predictions suggest that by 2026, Russia could see the arrival of an additional 40,000 Indian workers, more than the current population of some cities. An enormous effort is underway to meet this goal, with some claiming the numbers could reach as high as 1 million Indian workers, an unprecedented scale of state-sponsored labor import. Why is Russia so desperate? The answer lies beneath the surface: an economy strained by war and a declining native workforce. Critical industries such as machinery, electronics, and construction are facing an impossible shortage of workers. Entire factories in regions like Sverdlovsk and Ivanova are relying solely on imported labor. Are these factories the new battlegrounds of a silent crisis? And then, the story takes a darker turn. Evidence appears that some of these imported workers are being sent into combat zones. Reports claim that Indian workers, promised work, are ending up on the front lines in Ukraine. Witnesses have shared harrowing videos, shocking proof of young men, inexperienced in military life, thrown into deadly conflict. One Indian worker's voice echoes a haunting truth: many have been sent to the war, many didn't come back, and the Indian government? They don't care. Imagine the horror, contracts signed for simple jobs turning into harrowing battles. One young Indian man recounts how his friend signed a deal with the Russian military, thinking it was just work. 10 days later, dead. Why? Lack of military training. These men, seeking stability, become victims of a dangerous scheme. The front lines near Pokrovsk are now graveyards for untrained laborers who never knew the horrors awaiting them. Could this be a calculated ploy? Are political agreements, like Putin's recent visit to India, masking a sinister strategy? Official visas and travel agreements may serve as cover stories for the true purpose, using foreign manpower as disposable soldiers, all while Russia's own population withers away. While the Kremlin's ambitions look grand, an empire powered by imported workers, what price do these nations pay? The Indian government's silence and the sacrifices of these young men raise urgent questions. Every step in this intricate dance of diplomacy and economic necessity leaves lives shattered. What emerges from this complex web is a startling reality. the dream of a greater Russia is fading, replaced by a new, brutal truth, an unstable workforce, a desperation for manpower, and a shocking willingness to sacrifice lives. In the shadows of Ukraine's trenches, a silent tragedy unfolds. A story that begins with dancing in Red Square ends with young men lost in the chaos of war, victims of a geopolitical gamble they never understood. Are these sacrifices truly necessary? Or is this a dark chapter where human lives are merely collateral? The truth is clear: behind the facade of strength and power, Russia is quietly rewriting its future. But at what cost? The story begins with a vibrant dance on Moscow's Red Square, a symbol of strength and tradition. But beneath the surface, an unsettling transformation is underway. Just beyond the Kremlin's formidable walls, a new scene unfolds, one of hurried lines, crowded dormitories, and a relentless influx of strangers from thousands of miles away. Imagine tens of thousands of Indian workers waiting for their papers, their footsteps echoing in corridors once filled only with Russian voices. The air is thick with the smell of spices, sizzling on makeshift stoves in narrow hallways. Shoes pile on the floor, and the murmur of conversations in unfamiliar languages blends with the hum of machinery in nearby factories. These are not just workers, they are a new wave reshaping Moscow's very fabric. But what is driving this surge? Behind the scenes, strategic plans reveal a calculated move by the Kremlin. Officially, around 27,000 Indian workers are in Russia now, yet images show a much larger crowd, more than 10,000 waiting just outside an immigration office. International sources warn that the real numbers are far higher, possibly approaching 1 million future entrants. The government claims it needs hundreds of thousands to fuel its industries, yet the truth hints at something darker. These workers are promised astonishing salaries up to 100,000 rubles a month, roughly $1,240, an incredible sum amid Russia's economic turbulence. But beneath this promise lies chaos. The ruble's value has tumbled, inflation is soaring, and the economy struggles to hold together. Still, the Kremlin pushes forward. Bent on filling empty factories and desperate to keep their war effort alive. The silent numbers grow: more workers, more dorms, more dependency, and the question lingers, at what cost? Because this story doesn't end in the factories. The real horror is in the trenches of Ukraine. Confidential reports and eyewitness videos reveal a heartbreaking truth. Many of these imported workers, lured by promises of work, have been thrust into the chaos of war without proper training. They are sent to the front lines, exposed to relentless gunfire and treacherous terrain. Their cries of despair echo in videos, confessions of life lost in mere days. One Indian worker's voice echoes, quietly haunted, "We all know how this will end." Many others have vanished in deadly battles near Pokrovsk. Some were sent into hell, under the guise of industrial labor, only to be betrayed by their own governments, used as pawns in a war they didn't understand. The young man recalls his friend's tragic fate, just 10 days after signing a contract, death struck without warning, leaving behind only questions and grief. This dark reality illuminates a grim truth: Russia's reliance on imported labor is not just economic, it's a strategic gamble with lives. The Kremlin's plan to build a stronger Russia has become a dangerous facade. While factories are powered by foreign hands, the front lines are populated by untrained, involuntary soldiers. The border between industry and war has blurred, soldiers turned from workers into casualties. Putin's grand vision seems to be crumbling under the weight of this costly deception. The so-called superpower is no longer driven solely by its own people. Instead, a foreign workforce, brought in for wages, stands in for Russian soldiers, many of whom are fighting and dying. The myth of unbreakable Russia is dissolving, replaced by dependence and fragility. As foreign children are sent into the trenches, Russia's social fabric is quietly unraveling. The war's toll isn't only measured in rubles or battlefield casualties. It seeped into the very heartbeat of society, a crisis more insidious and far-reaching. The economy's arteries are drying up, drained of local capital, diverted into foreign pockets. A once self-sufficient nation now quietly sacrifices its future for a war that seems increasingly unwinnable. The ripple effects are devastating. Every ruble paid to a worker in remote dormitories is no longer spent locally. No longer circulating within Russian society, those funds leave the country, flowing into distant cities like Mumbai, Delhi, and Bangalore. Russia's reserves shrink, its economic independence erodes, and the cost of survival shifts onto others. This story, which started in dance and celebration, has descended into the harsh realities of war and economic collapse. Behind the scenes, a silent battle rages, one not only fought with weapons but with the very essence of a nation's future. The question remains, how much longer can this masquerade of strength be sustained before everything collapses? Imagine walking through Moscow's historic Red Square, the heart of Russian power. Instead of soldiers marching or political rallies, you see a flood of unfamiliar faces, Indians filling the space. How did this happen? Are they tourists, or something darker? At first glance, the scene appears lively, colorful clothing, dancing, smiling faces. Yet, beneath that cheerful veneer, a silent transformation is taking place. These images, showing Indian workers in vibrant traditional dress, seem innocent. But what if they hide a threatening truth? Sources like France 24 reveal a disturbing secret. Many of these workers aren't just filling factories, they're being sent straight to the deadly front lines in Ukraine. The implications are chilling. With Russian soldiers fighting abroad, who's left behind? And what happens to those sent into chaos, far from home and family? Are they pawns in a larger game? Now, turn your attention to Moscow's immigration offices. Witnesses describe a human tide, tens of thousands of Indian migrants queued endlessly, hope and trepidation in their eyes. What is this scene? Is this our new reality? An entire city of 10,000 newcomers standing shoulder to shoulder in narrow lines, fighting for their documents, their future. Yet the numbers tell a stark story. Official figures reveal around 27,000 Indian workers are currently in Russia. But these images suggest a much larger influx. Could this be enough to replace the Russian men casualties in the war? Absolutely not. The government admits the labor shortage is critical. The bleak truth, Russia is losing its workforce rapidly. Could foreign labor be their only hope? In Moscow's streets, an economic desperation is palpable. Indians are promised salaries of around 100,000 rubles per month, about $1,240. For many, this is an escape, an opportunity of a lifetime. But there's a shadow lurking behind the promise. As the ruble weakens and inflation climbs, can these promises be kept? Or are these workers unwitting pawns in a larger, darker game? Beyond the city, this migration wave grows unstoppable. Predictions suggest that by 2026, Russia may see an influx of 40,000 more Indian workers, more than some cities' entire populations. An enormous effort is underway. Some even claim the total could reach 1 million, an unprecedented state-sponsored labor campaign. Why such desperation? The answer lies beneath the surface: an economy strained by war, with native workers vanishing. Critical industries, machinery, electronics, construction, are suffering. Entire factories in Sverdlovsk and Ivanova rely solely on imported labor. Are these factories the new silent battlegrounds of a crisis nobody talks about? And then, darkness. Evidence emerges that some of these workers aren't just building or manufacturing, they're being sent into war. Reports reveal Indian migrants, promised steady jobs, are ending up on the deadly front lines in Ukraine. Witness videos show young men, inexperienced in combat, thrown into the chaos of battle. One worker's voice breaks as he admits, many have been sent to the war. Many didn't come back. And the government? They don't care. Imagine the horror: contracts for simple jobs turning into deadly missions. One young man recounts how a friend signed up thinking it was just work. 10 days later, dead. Why? No military training, no preparation. These men, seeking stability, become victims of a sinister scheme. The brutal front near Pokrovsk has turned into a graveyard for untrained migrants. Could this be part of a calculated plan? Diplomacy, like the recent Putin Indian leader's visit, seems to mask a darker strategy, using foreign workers as disposable soldiers, while Russia's own population disappears. Official visas, agreements, they might be just covers. The real purpose? Filling the war's gaps with imported lives. What does this mean for the future? Russia's grand ambitions, a powerful empire, are fading behind a facade of imported labor. The Indian government remains silent as its young men are sacrificed. Every move, every deal, leaves shattered lives behind. What emerges from this web of diplomacy, economics, and desperation? A startling truth: the dream of a greater Russia is slipping away. It's replaced by a brutal reality, an unstable, exploited workforce, and lives sacrificed in a geopolitical gamble. Beneath Ukraine's trenches, a silent tragedy unfolds. What began with dancing and celebration in Red Square now ends in loss and chaos. Young men sent to war, many never returning, victims of a dangerous, unseen gamble. Are these sacrifices truly necessary? Or is this a dark chapter where human lives are merely collateral? Behind the spectacle of strength, Russia is quietly reshaping its future at a terrible price. Beneath the vibrancy of Moscow's Red Square, where centuries of tradition echo through cobblestones and vibrant festivities, a dark transformation quietly unfolds. The city's heartbeat, once driven solely by its Russian core, now pulses with foreign footsteps, thousands of Indian workers filling narrow corridors, their silhouettes flickering in the glow of makeshift stoves, their voices a strange harmony in labyrinthine dormitories. The scent of spices and sizzling food blends into the thick air, contrasting sharply with the silent, watchful presence of machinery echoing in nearby factories. Imagine waves of laborers, waiting silently in lines that stretch into the unknown, their eyes filled with hope or despair. This is not mere migration, it's a strategic reshaping of an entire nation's foundation, orchestrated behind closed doors. Official figures claim around 27,000 Indian workers are in Russia now, yet videos reveal a different reality, more than 10,000 queued in front of immigration offices, and sources whisper that the numbers could approach 1 million. These figures are not just numbers, they reflect a desperate attempt by the Kremlin to stave off economic collapse and war fatigue. They promise these migrant workers astonishing wages up to 100,000 rubles a month, roughly $1,240. But as the ruble's value plunges and inflation spirals, this promise begins to fade behind the chaos of a crumbling economy. Amid rising desperation, more workers pour in, 40,000 expected next year alone, each one seen as a vital piece in Russia's urgent puzzle. International whispers suggest that this influx isn't solely for economic stability. It's a strategic maneuver, possibly even a covert reserve of manpower for the battlefields in Ukraine. The crumbling social fabric is vividly apparent in overcrowded dormitories, corridors transformed into temporary homes for thousands. Piles of shoes, boiling spices, the hum of multilingual conversations, these are the new sounds of Russia's heart. Yet, beneath this facade, a darker reality lurks. These workers, lured by promises of prosperity, are being sent into the chaos and violence of war zones without proper training, mere pawns in a game far beyond their understanding. Heartbreaking videos show Indian workers silently recounting their grim fate caught in the deadly conflict near Pokrovsk. Many lost their lives in a blinding flash of gunfire, their dreams shattered before they even truly began. One young man's voice trembles as he recalls his friend's tragic story. Just 10 days after signing a contract, he vanished amid the hellfire of the front lines. These stories reveal a shocking truth: the promise of employment has become a deadly gamble. Russia, unable to rely on its own citizens, is turning to foreign workers, transforming them into involuntary soldiers in a brutal war. The boundary between industry and combat has dissolved. Those who once toiled in factories now find themselves fighting for survival in trenches already saturated with death. This reliance on imported labor is no longer a mere economic necessity, it's a strategic gamble that threatens to fracture the nation's very soul. The grand illusion of unassailable power is collapsing, replaced by dependence on foreign recruits, many of whom are fighting and dying in a war they were never meant to understand. The narrative of a mighty Russia, resilient and self-sufficient, fades in dusty factory floors and muddy trenches alike. Instead, a fragile reliance on outsiders, brought in under the guise of economic necessity, governs the nation's destiny. As the war drags on, the true cost becomes painfully clear: the fabric of Russian society is unraveling. The economic arteries, once pumping vitality through the country, run dry, funds diverted abroad to distant cities like Mumbai, Delhi, and Bangalore. Every ruble paid to a worker in a dormitory isn't spent in Russian markets, it disappears into foreign coffers. Russia's reserves diminish, its economic independence erodes, and the nation's fragile future hangs in the balance. This story began with dance and celebration, but now descends into the harsh realities of war and economic ruin. Behind closed doors, a silent battle rages, one fought not with weapons alone, but with the very future of a nation. How much longer can this illusion of strength be maintained before everything collapses under its weight? The stakes have never been higher, and the coming days will reveal whether this silent restructuring can stave off destruction or hasten its arrival.